Okay, let's get started. First of all, hello, and thank you all for joining this session. My name is Victor. I work as a business intelligence consultant for over 7 years now. And one of the things I encounter the most is data visualization, meaning how I can show data to the customers such that they can get the right insights from it. So through this presentation, which is called Best Practices in Data Visualization, I'll try to show you some tips and tricks that I've learned and used for presenting the data in a useful manner. First of all, I have a question for you. That is, how many of you have created at least a chart showing any kind of data? Okay, yeah, I expected that. So yeah, we are surrounded by data, so it's common to use it in some form. So for those of you who have created charts before, this session will come in handy for improving your skills and maybe learning some new stuff. For the others, it's a good introduction into what data visualization is, what types of charts are there, and when should they be used. As with any process, the building a visualization has some specific steps. First one is start with questions, next choosing the right chart, third one would be to creating an effective view, and the last one, which is quite interesting, is to combine those views in a useful dashboard. So first one, start with questions. As you all know, we're surrounded by data. There's a huge amount of data worldwide, and it keeps increasing at a fast pace. Anyone can get lost in trying to understand that data, and what we're trying to do is extract information and insights from data. So when we look at data, it's just raw data standing there. Information and insights is what we gather from it. It is vital that your visualization or the chart you create has a purpose, and the best way of knowing if your visualization has a purpose is to ask yourself some questions. First one is, what are you trying to say? This is the most important step, as you can take some raw data and create a visualization that actually says something. So you have to know what you're trying to say. Who is your audience? This is again really important if you're presenting the data to tech people or someone with just business knowledge, let's say. The contexts are different, so you have to know your audience. It's the same everywhere. There are famous cases where singers came to Bucharest and said, "Hello, Budapest." Okay, so the crowd was lost from that point, right? Even if they liked the artist, that was a huge mistake. So know your audience. You should also know what questions do they have. Well, if they have questions, if you know who you're showing something to. Otherwise, think about what questions might they have. And, of course, what answers can you find for them. From the answers you find for them, there might get some other questions, so think about that too. Because everything you do will start a conversation if you show the right data in the correct version. So keep in mind what you want to say, what they might be interested in, and find that sweet spot called relevance. Because your viewers should take something away from the time they spend with your visualization. They shouldn't just stay there and look at the data. They should find something useful and maybe start a conversation from it. Okay, second part is choosing the right chart. There are some guidelines and best practices on this. We'll go through a couple of scenarios and see what charts fit best for those and which charts don't fit at all and why. So, trends over time, this is one of the most common visualizations. You want to show the trend of something over a period of time, even if it's years, months, days, or whatever you want to choose. And then, let's say the most used chart for this would be the line chart. You might have only one value on it, meaning one category or multiple categories. And it tells a quite interesting story. This is the tourist income by region, for example, and you can clearly see from the start the upper line, which is Europe. It has the most income from tourists, followed by the Americas, which sometime around 2011 were overcame by Asia, which is now the second place. And Africa, of course, with the lower value coming from tourist income. So this is quite simple. It doesn't have any kind of things that might get you distracted from the actual data. The only issue is, again, going back to what you're trying to say. Okay, if you're trying to say that, okay, here's the trend by region, you can use this chart. But what if your story also wants to tell if what is the overall income globally from tourists? Then you have another option, which would be the stacked bar chart, in which you can clearly see the upper line, which represents actually the total, right? The top of the bar is the total for the entire globe. This is still useful for comparing regions, but it's somehow limited. Why? Because you can see Europe quite clearly here, as it has the same baseline on the x-axis. But if you want to compare the trend for the Americas, it is quite difficult to compare these sections here, just because they are not starting at the same place. So humans are not really good at comparing something that's here to something that's here. It's pretty hard to compare the length of that line or that bar. And again, it's the same with the upper two, the Asia and Africa. Another issue is that you can't clearly compare between regions. Like in the upper line chart, you can see that Asia overcome America. Here you can't easily see that. If you have a tool showing the values, okay, you can see that, or you can actually add the values there. But it's not something you can see at the first sight. Now, a variant of the stacked bar chart is the area chart. This is commonly used as well. You might have seen it a lot. It has almost the same limitations as the bar chart. However, the trend of a specific region in the middle can be more easily, I would say, interpreted or solved. What I'm trying to do here, if I'm trying to tell two stories at once, so one is the separate trend by each category, and one is the overall, there's a combination for the line chart, which adds a new value, the gray one, let's say, or any other color, with the total. This is using the dual axis, so the axis on the left is for the colored lines, the axis on the right is for the gray line. So keep in mind that the axes are desynchronized, but you can easily see what the overall trend is, what the individual trends are, and how the individual trends affect the overall trend. So you might see some correlations there. Of course, 2009 was a year of crisis, so we see a drop in almost all regions except Africa, and the overall is affected by all three of them. But let's say at another point here from 2011 to 2012, Europe got down, however, the overall wasn't affected. So the other regions compensated for the drop in tourism we saw in Europe. So again, choose the right chart. These are 4 examples. You can use any of them. I would recommend the line chart as it's easier for the human mind to read it. And if you add the total, that's even better. If you want to highlight the total, if you don't, just don't do it. Another scenario where you might want to show trends over time is when you have 2 time dimensions, and I'll show you an example. You have the hours of the day and the days of the week. So what you're trying to see is, let's say you have a restaurant and there are customers coming to your place. You want to see which hours are the most crowded. This type of visualization lets you do that easily. So you can easily see that from 8 to 9 p.m., almost in any day of the week except Monday, you have many customers there. So you can use that to plan your resources, right, for serving people, for the kitchen and everything else. So yeah, this is basically the only way, scenario when heat maps come in handy is when you have two time dimensions. Otherwise, it doesn't really make sense. We compare lots of stuff, right? We compare countries between each other. We compare sports players, their performance, and so on. We compare businesses one to another to see which one is more profitable or which one has most sales. When handling comparisons and ranking, the best solution would be a simple bar chart. Ordered, maybe with a label with values on it. For example, this one shows the CO2 emissions by region in kilotons, and it's sliced by region, right? Asia, Americas. Why is this useful? First of all, you can see Asia is the first one. So it pollutes the most. Then we have the Americas, we have Europe, third place. You can also compare easily the length of the segments of the bars and see that Europe is half of Asia, right? So we can see lots of insights from it. So this would be a comparison and also some kind of ranking, right? Because we've ordered them. Another example would be top 10 countries by population. So we have China in first place, as we all know, India coming close second, and United States third. Again, if I would have only used the table with the figures, you wouldn't have seen such that huge difference between China and India and the next states. This way, seeing these segments lengths, you can easily see that this is less than a third of the upper segments. So my advice would be to always use bar charts for this type of stuff. Another type of comparison would be to a target or prediction. We always set targets for ourselves or for others. We make predictions of what might happen, and then we'll try to compare what happened to what we thought it will happen, or what was the target. This is called a bullet chart. It's a variation of the bar chart. What it has in plus are these reference lines, which represent, in this case, the target or the prediction. In this case, it's the target. So these are sales people. Each one has a target established. We can easily see which of them managed their target, which ones didn't. And color coding, this makes it even more useful. I'm a manager. I take a look at this chart. Two data points stand out. That is the two people who haven't met their targets. So again, this can go with any kind of target, prediction, or anything you want to show. One of my favorites, I would say, is bar-to-whole relationship. And I believe for all of you, when you hear about bar-to-whole, this thing comes to mind. This is the famous pie chart. Well, I'm trying to get people away from them, and I'll try to convince you to why. So let's see some arguments. This case is one of which a pie chart was correctly, let's say, implemented. I've seen pie charts showing stuff that are not, for which the sum of them are not, that do not represent 100%, which is really odd, and I believe you saw those two. Going back to this case, so what kind of insights can I gather from this? First of all, Asia is the largest slice, meaning it has the highest population, and it's over 50% of the entire world population. Then going to Africa, okay, it's an important slice of it, and then comes America. I have an issue here. Is it Africa greater than the Americas or not? If the user who created, the person who created the visualization was smart enough to order these values, then yes, okay, Africa has a higher population compared to the Americas. But this is just something that I guess, right? And again, here you don't even see the slice for Oceania, so it's quite difficult to read. What you can do indeed is add labels. Labels come in handy as you you can see the actual values. What happens is that people are really bad at estimating 2D areas. So it's quite hard to compare them, especially if there's an angle involved. So I can't really say, is this slice bigger than this one, or is this one bigger? Another thing that's, let's say, extra information on a pie chart, and you can't do a pie chart without it, is the color coding. We're using colors for segments, but the colors don't represent anything. So in this case, it's just some extra information put there just to help us understand the pie chart. And it's somehow the same with the tree map. This one has an advantage of being able to fit an entire screen or a region of a screen, but still it's quite hard to distinguish between values. And if you have multiple values, I've seen pie charts or tree maps with hundreds of values. That's definitely there's no purpose of showing that unless you want to highlight that one section and only one is higher than the others together. So yeah, this would be the tree map, and the variant of the tree map, which would be a stacked bar chart, which is basically a shrinked tree map to a single row. Now, instead of using pie charts for this example, I could easily use a bar chart. Using a bar chart comes in handy because I can see Asia is the largest, then it comes Africa, then the Americas, Europe, and so on. And since I now have a bar chart, I can get rid of the colors. They don't represent anything. The only shortcoming of the bar chart is that the human mind doesn't understand from start that these values together are 100%. So they might not recognize a part-to-whole relationship. You could trigger this into the human mind by adding a label, a simple label, or saying world population, percent of total by region. This way, I got rid of the colors, which didn't represent anything at all. I came up with a simple visualization showing the totals by region. Another thing when not having colors is that the human mind is, for the human mind, it's easier to see how much smaller is this one compared to the other one, because there's no hue involved into it. One of the only cases where pie charts might be used, but still, we'll see a better version, is when we have only two values. This chart shows the customer visits split by new visitors versus returning visitors. So yeah, I can easily see this slice is higher, I can see the values here, it's that much higher, okay. But it occupies a lot of space, and besides the fact that it looks nice, you could easily do something like this. So you have a simple bar chart, new visits, returning visits, you have 0%, 100% labels, such that you understand that it's a part-to-whole relationship, and the fact that it's only one bar definitely makes the case of having a part-to-whole relationship. And another useful tip here is to add a line at 50%. That way, if the values are really close, you can see which one is the higher. This goes for comparisons like male-female, or any other cases where you have two values. So please don't use pie charts or donut charts. I've seen donut charts as well, or any other tasty charts. Bars should be there, and I believe we all agree on that one. Okay, please, we have one question.
Could you go back to the previous slide?
Oh, yeah.
So here you have percentages, but some form of visualization is to present the absolute values. So billions of people in Asia, let's say.
So
if you put a bar chart, you don't see the proportions. So you could have a pie chart where you have the absolute values, and you could see the proportions, right?
why can't I see the proportions here? It's like pretty much from the total, right? And I can see 56.2. Am I missing the question? I mean, bar charts shouldn't be used only for absolute values. Even for percentages, those are great. We'll see some cases next. But you can, I mean, when you look at the percentage, you're not interested necessarily on that percentage only, but its comparison to the next percentages. Let's say you have a firm, a business, and it's holding, and it has 30% share of the market. Wouldn't you like to, instead of having, let's say you're at 30%, your competitor is at 33%, and another competitor at 34%. If you would put that in a pie chart and with the others, you wouldn't know if you're better than them or worse. Having that placed in a simple ordered bar chart will tell you that story. And you can even highlight your company if you want.
So let me rephrase my question. So you wouldn't say that Asia is half of the total population, right? You wouldn't see that because you would see just a number next to the bar, whatever billion, 3 billion, but you wouldn't see that it's half. You would see just...
It's here it's written the percentage. It's not the absolute value.
But if you would like to see absolute value,
oh, if you want to see absolute values.
That's what I'm saying, right?
Okay. In that case, for absolute values, if I want to see the absolute values, first of all, I want to think if absolute values make sense when I'm looking at total population. And I could use both of them, right? The percentage, read them, and in the parenthesis, I could put the value, or vice versa. But yeah, thank you for the question.
Also, x-axis to go to 100% and to 60-something%. That way, you know that if the particular bar, the top bar for Asia, goes up to only 56%, it is about half of the whole.
Yeah, it is a good. Yeah, it is actually a good tip. You could do that, and I could, you could definitely do that. One shortcoming of that is when you have a much longer chart, the lower values will not be that visible. But yeah, it's actually a good idea. Now, another scenario is correlations. When we're talking about correlations, we talk about cases where you want to compare and understand how two measures are affecting each other or how do they correlate. For example, let's look at the internet coverage by country compared to your urban population. So each dot here, each circle, represents a country, color-coded by its region. The higher the circle, the higher the population, as you can see here. On the x-axis, we have the percent of internet coverage, and on the y-axis, we have the percent of urban population, so people who live in cities or urban areas. Now, why is this useful? Is that you can clearly see in this example that almost all the countries fall on the diagonal from bottom left to upper right. And let's take a case. This is China, the biggest country. It's around 50%. It has around 50% internet coverage, and it has around 42-43% of urban population. Taking India, we can see that it's at around 20% internet coverage with 25% population urban. You can see that there might be a correlation between these as the population urban increases, meaning the dots are getting higher and higher. Also, the internet coverage increases, meaning the bullets, the circles go from left to right. So there is a correlation, I believe, as expected between the two.
Sorry, how do you know which one is India, which one is China, which one is...
For this chart, so it's interactive, so when you put the mouse on top of it, it will show you the actual country. So this, that's actually a good question. Whenever you use, these are called scatter plots. So whenever you use scatter plots, you expect to have lots of values on it. It's almost impossible to add labels to all of them. But yeah, what you're interested really in is seeing the overall trend, and then if you want to look at specific values, you click on it and you see the details. Let's go to a business case, let's say. Let's say one manager wants to see what's the relationship between the the sale price of a product, of all products, and the quantity sold. In this case, each circle represents a product. On the x-axis, you have the sales quantity, and on the y-axis is the sale price. As you see, all the values fall onto this diagonal, more or less, meaning the higher the price, the lower the quantity sold. And we have another measure here, which says net profit, which is the size of the circle. What this can tell you, since you're seeing the same size of the circle here and here and here, is that the sale price or the sales quantity doesn't affect the net profit of that product. In this case, for some other data, it could be a completely different statement. So we have now 3 measures. We can see how each one correlates to the other. These go well when you don't have a time dimension involved. There are options actually of adding time dimensions on these type of charts, where you have a slider for going from one period to another and the data points move. But if you want to look at the entire trend, it's quite hard to do that. So if you have a time dimension, there's a solution for that too, meaning using combo charts, which combines line charts with bar charts, basically, or you could even have only line charts. First one, sales price, then sales quantity, net profit. You have to be careful here, because while here we have all the products shown individually, on this one these are aggregated at monthly level. So we can see the total for each month. In this case, we see when the average sale price of our products increased from 2010 to the end of 2011, the quantity we sold decreased, but our average net profit was the same. So yeah, scatter plots are pretty useful when you don't have time dimension. If you have one, you can use combo charts. Distribution, next scenario, is when you try to see all the values in the data set and see how often they occur, what is the actual value, and what you're mostly interested in distribution is actually the shape of the data set. Let me show you an example. This is a test, some tests, performance testing done, and we have 2 scenarios. Left one was the current one, right one was when we modified a couple of things and tried to make the queries more performant. Each circle represents a test run, so it's one run. Now, this is called a box plot or box and whisker. This is really useful for statisticians and people who want to dig further into the data. It's not a simple chart. It takes some knowledge to understand it. So, like I said at the beginning, if you have a person you want to show data to and they don't understand this kind of stuff, it's quite hard to use such a chart, unless you start to explain that to you. So the components of the box and whisker plot is actually can be explained like this. The difference here between the 2 shades, so here is the median value. Median meaning the middle of the data set. If we ordered all values, that the middle one would be the median. Then you have this, let me add, okay. So then you have the 25th percentile here and 75th percentile here. All this gray area with both shades represent 50% of the population. So we know that 50% of our tests took between 40 seconds and 80 seconds in the first case. So it was a 40 seconds difference between different runs, while in the second test it was between 18 and 32 seconds. So we've not only reduced the time to execute a specific query, but we've also reduced the discrepancy between different tests. Then you have some other additions here. This one would be the highest value that is still within the 75th percentile plus the interquartile range, plus 1.5 the interquartile range. And here is the lowest data value that is still between that. Now, in this case, we don't have those, but you might have data points outside this representation, which would be the outliers. Now, another version of showing distribution is histogram. This one tells a completely different story. So this chart is regarding patient treatment length by triage acuity histogram. So basically what we're doing here is, okay, let's say we have a hospital with patients coming in. And for each of them, we spend some time making them there. Depending on the time they spent in our hospital, we split them into groups. Okay, so this one spent between 0 and 10 minutes, this one between 10 and 20 minutes, and so on, right? This way we can see that most of our patients stayed around 70 minutes. And we have some other dimensions showing how urgent was the reason why they came. So it was resuscitation, emergent, urgent, less urgent, not urgent, and so on. So this one shows you some kind of shape of your data. Now, going to geographical data, there's one simple way of showing geographical data, that is to use a map chart. They're everywhere. You'll see lots of visualization with this one. So looking at this, it shows real GDP growth across Europe in 2009, and it's actually right how it was in 2009 compared to 2008. As we all know, 2009 was a year of crisis, so we expect that most of the countries had a negative GDP growth. So they basically dropped. The only exception here being Poland. Now, I can take lots of context from this chart, and again, usually these charts come with interactivity, tooltips, so hovering on a state will show you the actual value. What I'm recommending you is whenever you use map charts is to pair them with other charts for extra details. In this case, I've chosen to highlight the top 5 countries in terms of GDP growth and the bottom 5. In the top 5, you'll see only Poland, who has a positive value, followed by Macedonia, which is negative growth anyway, Norway, Cyprus, Switzerland. While the ones which were hit the most by the crisis were Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, followed by Finland, and Slovenia. So if you use, you could use any kind of charts to add context to this map chart. You could use a trend line, for example, at the bottom showing the trend before 2009 and after it. You could also add a simple table view with the actual data behind it. It's useful for the end user to have options on how he can see that data and check it. Okay, I wouldn't say it's a chart, but it's a way of showing data, are the number callouts. And this is an example. Okay, so sales this year, $733,000. But this one, without context, means little. We don't know. Is this good? Is this bad? Is this higher than we predicted or not? So whenever you use number callouts, try to add some context into it. Like this case, adding the comparison to previous year. So okay, this year until March, we've earned this much. And it's 21% more than last year. Already I have more context. Am I doing better? Am I doing worse? It goes the same. So these are sometimes called, when you also have this one, it's KPIs. So key performance indicators. Managers love them in a sense that they can take a glance at the data and see what's happening. What you could also do is add a color for the trend. This way I can see it's green. It's quite easy to understand that, okay, I'm doing better. If it would have been a negative value, it would have been red. So I could see that we're not doing that good. And try to get rid of the details if those are not required. Like this one, I'm probably not interested in these in the last part of the figure. So I can just round it, easier to read, easier to understand. Two more examples here, which I saw and I really liked. So again, we have the number, we have the comparison, and we also have a trend for the last period. So you keep in mind that you have to supply adequate context for the data, unless it doesn't mean actually anything. So this is where you enrich your charts after you decide on which type of charts to use. You can enrich by showing variations in timing, like year to date, week to date, quarter to date, yesterday, today, whatever value you want to show. Comparison, so if you show a value, try to compare it to another value, like a previous period, but similar in terms of extent, to a target, to a prediction, or anything you might find useful. And of course, evaluations, like if we're on target, I can simply put a green dot there, or make the figure green. That way I know I'm doing well. Okay. Any questions? Any other questions until now? Yeah.
Where can we find all these charts? Are they available in, for example, in Excel? Can you find all?
Excel offers most of these charts. Yes. Personally, I use Tableau for developing data visualizations. It has a free trial of only 14 days, I believe, Tableau. But what I like about it is that it's a really easy to use tool. It's just drag and drop. It also already includes best practices into it. So by default, if you add a time dimension and the measure, it will create a line chart by default.
What's the name of the tool again?
Tableau.
Tableau.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite an interesting tool. I worked with a couple of tools, and this one was, I believe, the most intuitive to use.
Can you say the other tools you use for that?
ClickView, which again, it's a really good tool. Excel, of course, you can create charts in Excel. Reporting services from Microsoft, but unfortunately, I worked with that a really long time ago. There was still, I believe, in 2005 version of it. And what I didn't like about it is it didn't offer you interaction between charts. So if I placed, back then, if I placed two charts, I couldn't interact with them, click on one and filter the other. But I believe they've changed from that. And that one was from Oracle, which is OBEE, and yeah, still a good tool.
Why not Power BI?
Haven't used it. Power BI. I know it's from Microsoft, right? Power BI right now. It's developed by Microsoft.
Actually, all the companies are going for Power BI because it's very cheap.
Oh, okay.
They are replacing Tableau and ClickView to Power BI.
Is it that cheap, Power BI?
Yep. $10 a month.
$10 a month?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. I know Tableau it's at 30, right? $30 per month if you buy the online license. But yeah.
Yeah, but if you have the full package, that could go like to $1,200 a year.
Yeah.
Which is quite a lot.
Yeah, I know. The full license, at least for a customer I've worked with, it was $200,000 for unlimited licenses, unlimited everything.
Yeah, if you have a server.
Yeah. Okay. Now, creating effective views. We'll talk here about attentive versus pre-attentive processing. So, pre-attentive processing is actually what your mind does before you even know it. While attentive processing is what involves a couple of some work of thought from your side. And let me show you that by example. I'll show you some numbers here, and I'll ask you to tell me how many 5s are there. Okay, time's up. How many of you think there were 4 5s there? Raise your hand. 4 5s. Okay. 5 5s? 6 5s? 7? Okay, so disregarding if you got it right or wrong, you had to use what it's called attentive processing. So you had to scan each value at a time and see if it's a 5 or not. Humans are quite I mean, for the human brain, it's quite difficult to compare such a difficult shape of a number to another, so it takes a lot of time to do that. In comparison, if I would show you this, you could easily tell me how many 5s are there. No, I didn't. Let me go back. Can you see the 5 there now? Okay, so what I did here is use your pre-attentive processing. So your brain saw these numbers and saw that the 5s are highlighted. So they have a different intensity. This is one of the pre-attentive attributes that we'll talk about. So you can use this trick to emphasize the most important data. So if you want to show a chart and highlight something, you could use intensity to highlight that thing. There are a couple of pre-attentive attributes. I'll go through them and yeah. So first one is hue, meaning a different color. You'll easily observe the different circle. Another one is intensity, which we've just seen before. 2D location, orientation, line length, line width, size, shape, added marks, and a closure. So all of these are, when you see any of these, your brain will see the outlier there. You'll see that something is different. But not all of them are quantitative. So not all of them can be used for comparing data. For example, hue. Okay, this one is blue, the others are orange. Can I say that blue is 2 times better than orange? I can't say that. Can I say how much better is it? I can't. So this one is not quantitative. Intensity, on the other hand, is quantitative, but limited. I can say that this one is worse than the other, but I can't say by how much. 2D location is indeed a quantitative attribute. Orientation is not line length. It is line width, yes, but limited. Size, again, yes, but limited. Shape and so on. Okay, so the last ones are quantitative anyway. Let me show you another example. So we have 2 circles. We can clearly see that one is greater than the other. Can you guess if this one has a size of 1? What's the size of the bigger one? How many of you think it's 4? 5? 6? 7? 8?
15.
Area or diameter?
It would be the area, right? Why would you compare the diameter of it? And see how many times is bigger. So yeah, the answer is 16. What I wanted to highlight here is that this is not quantitative, it's a limited quantitative attribute, as humans tend to underestimate differences into the areas. So try to avoid this kind of comparison when trying to show something. Another thing would be to orient your views for legibility. Of course, you want to have the labels visible and easily understandable. So yeah, just keep it clear and readable. Avoid overloading. Like this chart here has lots of colors, lots of shapes, lots of variables into it. Try to avoid that. You could split the data in a different way, like in this example, in order to make it more readable. So all that glitters, not gold. Keep it simple. And another example here. See, you have lots of values on color. And yeah, just keep the values at the limited. And if you have a chart where you want to show too much information and it's not readable like this one and the previous ones, try to slice it into multiple charts. And provide interactivity between these charts in order to be easier to read. And again, I've told you about this before, is don't display excessive detail or precision, so keep your be aware of what kind of value you want to show. You don't have to always show the entire number, depending on your story. And the last one is choosing the correct measure. So if you have this case of comparing revenue, so actual revenue to a budget or a target, this way it's quite hard to read because you have to check where these lines go over each other. just set the budget as a straight line and use the variation in percentage to show the difference. So this one clearly shows when you were over the target, when were you below the target. But of course, this one only tells you the percent difference and not the actual value. So again, it's a matter of what you want to show. And use annotations, add all kind of labels or stuff that you want to highlight. Okay, last section here was combining using the multiple dashboards. I had some examples here, but we're a little bit out of time. I wanted to show you here how interactivity works in terms of, like, for example, in this chart, you can see the response time of a website, and on the lower side, you can see it sliced by page type. If you click on page type, it will update the upper chart, right? This is what now it's included in most reporting tools. You have interactivity, so please don't be afraid to use it. It's really useful. Okay, that was all. If you have any other questions, we have to wrap it up, it seems.
Any other questions? Don't ask.
Okay, moving on. Thank you. Thanks again for coming. Last thing, there's that feedback section. Forgot about it. Okay, so if you want to give me your feedback, that's really useful for me. And yeah, thank you.